Hi guys, welcome to my channel or welcome back to my channel. Today is episode 3 in my Parrot Day series. We are joined here with Fidget, my green cheek conure, and she is here because she is actually one of my rescue birds, and I'm talking to you. She keeps whispering nuts to me because she wants nuts. I put little food in this little toy bowl for her to sit here. My parakeets love it, but I put little food in there and I put pellets in there, and she's mad because there's already pellets in her cage and she thought she was getting something a little more exciting. I know, but we can't make you fat. So yes, we are here to talk about my rescue birds. Some of these birds I do not have anymore, and I'm not going to cover all of my rescue birds because I have rescued quite a few birds. And like I said, I don't have them all anymore. I do take some in and foster them until I can find them better homes. Or I do rescue older birds and sick birds that can spend their final days with me and a nice flock. So yeah, we're gonna get right into it. First bird on the list is Fidget here. Fidget was actually my friend's bird. She was not mistreated or abused in any way, shape, or form. But my friend did have cats, and her cats were okay with Fidget at first, but then the prey drive got to the cats and they did not get along after that. So Fidget was put in a larger cage at this point in a different room. They had upgraded her cage since she was going to spend a little more time in her cage and put her in a different room, and then they felt bad that they were not giving Fidget the attention that she deserved. And they thought that she would do better in a home that would bring her out of her cage more and be able to interact with her a little bit more. So they did rehome Fidget to me. So I took Fidget in from one of my friends. Yeah, and she is just the best bird. She lets me just like do just about anything to her. She loves when I flip her upside down on her back. She literally will fall asleep that way. If she's like in a nappy mood and I flip her upside down, she will literally just fall asleep with her little feet curled. And she lets me kiss her belly. She's just such a sweet bird. So next on the list is Nala. Nala, my umbrella cockatoo, which has been shown in a couple of my YouTube videos here. She was also a rescue. She actually came from a rescue, though. I did not rescue her myself. She actually came from a rescue, and I had adopted her. Her previous owner developed cancer and wanted to make sure that she went to a good home prior to her owner passing. So, what? Why are you so excited for some reason? I know. Are you tired? So they had, Nala's previous owner was friends with the owner of this rescue. So she gave Nala to the rescue and just asked that she found her a good home. She wanted to see where she went before she passed. So when we went to adopt Nala, we actually went down to see a blue and gold macaw named Sam that my fiance wanted. We had been looking into getting a macaw for a while at this point. We had a cockatiel and an Indian ringneck at home, so we were hoping that we could find a macaw that was going to be comfortable with both of us, and Sam just wasn't comfortable with both of us. He was not comfortable with men, so he had a little bit of an issue with my fiance, and we weren't in a right place at the time to take in a bird that needed some extra work, especially a larger bird at that point. But when we went to the rescue, we saw Nala, and it was love at first sight. Me and Nala anyway. My fiance was like, I don't know, but, so we took a couple of days and we went back and got Nala, and she is just the love of my life. And then next on the list is Pajeta and Merlin. Pajeta is the yellow-crowned Amazon that was in my episode 2 of my Parrot Day series. She is 23 years old right now. Oh, and Nala's 26, and I believe Fidget's about 6 or 7. Pajeta is 24, and we adopted her with our Timneh African Gray Merlin. They came from the same lady. She actually used to breed birds, and so she hatched Merlin herself and had Merlin for 20 years prior to giving him up to us. Merlin's 21, I think. Merlin's between 21 2022. And Pajeta, I'm actually Pajeta's third home because the previous owner that I got Pajeta from had rescued Pajeta from someone who, when Pajeta turned about 1 and started talking and getting a little loud, they decided that they did not want her anymore and were going to release her outside. And it was just not a good thing. So the lady that I got them from actually went and took Pajeta in, and had her ever since. And when she quit breeding birds, and she moved, and her living situation just changed, she was rehoming her birds, and Pajeta and Merlin were the last 2 birds that needed rehomed. So I did take them in. Pajeta does have a little bit of fatty liver disease. The lady that I got them from did really love Pajeta and Merlin, but she was very outdated on some of the feeding requirements for birds. So there were a lot of seeds in their diet and no pellets. And Pajeta wouldn't eat anything chop or fresh that she made. But now we have had Pajeta and Merlin for going on 2 years, and they both took to chop right away. As soon as we brought them home, they took to their chop right away. Merlin took to pellets right away. Pajeta did take a little bit of time, and about 6 months in, she was strictly eating only pellets and no seeds, because we had to take her completely off of seeds. Some of my birds do get a little bit of seed, some things like safflower seeds, just as a treat when we're training, but Pajeta cannot have that because she does have a fatty liver. And so we have to keep her on strictly chop and pellets because anything else could inflame her liver. So we can't do that. Oh, yeah, where are you trying to go? So we can't do anything like that with Pajeta and Merlin, but that is how we got them. Oliver and Oscar are my 2 white belly caiques. They are next on the list. They have a similar story to Fidget. Just one of my friends' father couldn't take care of them anymore and just wanted to give them a new home. So we did take them in. So not much of a rescue, but more of a rehome. Their names were Pumpkin and Pie, but I did change them to Oscar and Oliver. 4th is Gizmo, my white and gray cockatiel. We have 2 cockatiels. You did see Sham and Gizmo in my parrot food. Oh, thank you. That is the 3rd time you've pooped on me during this video. But Gizmo is our gray and white cockatiel. She was just being rehomed also from a family friend, knew that I had birds, and so we took her in as well. I did upgrade her cage. The cage she was in was kind of small, and she was on mostly seeds but some pellets, and so we got her all hooked up with a larger cage, some fresh chop, and everything like that. Now, next up is Sammy. You have seen some videos of Sammy. Sammy was our Timneh African Gray that it was our first African Gray that I had gotten for my fiance for Christmas. It was a rescue situation. He had always wanted an African Gray. And so when the opportunity arose, somebody was getting rid of Sammy, didn't want her anymore, and I went and got her just to give her a better home. Now, the situation with Sammy is a little bit different than some of these other stories. Sammy belonged to a truck driver, and Sammy never had a cage, never had proper food, was never fed any chop, was never fed any bird food of seeds, pellets, nothing. She ate strictly human food, mostly fast food because that's what the truck driver had, and she just sat on his shoulder all day long. She was the most fantastic bird. She definitely knew that she was going to a better place. She would eat just about anything because she was so excited to have her own stuff. So she would eat her own chops, she would eat her pellets, she would eat any treats that we gave her. And the thing with Sammy is she was about 16 years old, which is not old for an African Grey. However, being on such a crappy diet and never having a place of her own, never having a cage, anything of the sort, it did make her very, very unhealthy. So before I tell you about Sammy, I want to get into my next rescue, Jasper. We had gotten a call at the pet store that I used to work at, and they had asked if there was anybody there that had birds and was willing to take in a cockatiel that had no feathers, had completely plucked all of its feathers out. They said that it was absolutely mean, terrified of everything, and would not come out of the cage. So I agreed to take in this cockatiel. And when they showed up with an umbrella cockatoo, not a cockatiel, and he was plucked naked. And I still cry to this day thinking about the conditions that this bird was in. He had no feathers, and they had him in a tiny dog crate, and they said that that's what he lived in. He never had a cage. He lived in this tiny dog crate. There was one dowel rod perch in there for him to sit on. He had no toys. And I'm sorry, I get emotional when I talk about this because it was the saddest thing I've ever seen. He had no toys, and they had thrown in Pepsi cans, so he had ingested pieces of Pepsi can. And all he was allowed to eat were peanuts, and they would just throw the whole bag in. They would just rip a bag of peanuts open and throw the bag in because they were terrified of him. And when I saw this, I just couldn't take it. They didn't name him. They didn't fess up to this, but I'm pretty sure they used to beat his feet with the perches when he would be too loud. Because they said that when he was too loud, that was the only time the cage got opened and they would grab him. And I don't know what they did, but his feet were so swollen and he couldn't sit right. So I obviously had prepared for a cockatiel, but I could not leave this bird there. So I took him in, and he was very underweight. He wouldn't eat right. He was like very scared of everything, and he passed away very, very shortly after we got him. We had only had him about a month at this point, and he passed away. 2 days later, Sammy, the African Grey, passed away, and I'm pretty sure it definitely was my mistake, and I am going to live up to that because I think that this is a good lesson for everyone to learn. Jasper was not cleared by my vet at this point for any illnesses, and the reason for that is because Jasper was so terrified of everything that I could not get him in a carrier to get him to the vet. So I was working on teaching him that carriers were not scary, that hands were not scary. By the way, as soon as I opened that dog crate and tried to pull him out, they were screaming that he was such a mean bird, and I pulled him out and he stepped right up and started, like, it sounded like crying, honestly. It sounded like crying. He was making these god-awful noises and curled right up into my chest. It was the most terrible thing I've ever seen. But past that, it was hard enough to already get him home. So getting him to the vet was proving to be a struggle. And I I blame myself for this because I wasn't able to get him into the vet, that I am pretty sure he had an underlying illness, and Sammy being already not having a great diet, and she was seemingly healthy. The vet couldn't find any like fatty liver disease or anything, but I am pretty sure there was something else underlyingly wrong, because I'm pretty sure whatever Jasper had, he spread it to Sammy. Luckily, none of my other birds got sick enough that they passed, but Jasper and Sammy both passed in the same week, and it was the hardest month of my life. The hardest month of my life. So just as a fair warning, please, please, please be careful when you bring in a new bird, especially when you don't know any of its backstory, and you have other birds at home, because that was a mistake that I made. And now looking back, I know that I could have done better if I had quarantined Jasper for longer. If I was able to do better with training him to get him to the vet, but it was so difficult because for so many years I think he was 16, and for so many years he had to endure such a difficult life that he just didn't want to leave his home when he finally got one. So moving on from that, because that was the hardest thing that ever happened. Wally and Richard. Wally and Richard both came from separate homes. They were both male cockatiels. Wally came from, we don't even know how many homes Wally had. But the first owner that I am aware of kept him in a tiny little, what I call travel cages. Basically what you see at pet stores advertised for parakeets. They're still way too small for parakeets, but I call them travel cages. So he was housed in one of those, and please don't eat my bracelet. That was a very expensive bracelet. Hello. That's a very expensive bracelet. So he was housed in one of those travel cages. He had, again, no toys. The cage was filthy, and all he had, because they said that they didn't like to have him out, so they covered him in this giant wool blanket. So he basically, the sun didn't even shine through there, so he didn't even have a day and night cycle at this point. And they didn't like to go in there and mess with him because they said when they uncovered him, he would get loud and make chirps, and they didn't like that. So they didn't like to go in the cage more than they had to. So they put these giant dog bowls at the bottom that covered the entire bottom of the cage, so he couldn't even go to the bottom of the cage and move around, of food and water. And they would leave it in there for like 30 days, and they would only go in there once a month and change out the food and water. So he was very underweight from not having enough food. His water was really gross, and the cage was just caked in poop and old food and moldy water, and it was just disgusting. And then another woman had taken him in and put him in a slightly larger cage, but still a travel cage. At that point, he still didn't have any toys. He had one Cuttlebone mineral thing, which I don't like any of the things with the mineral around the edges, the colored ones. I just don't like any of those colored things. And that's all he had. But because he didn't have any toys, he would rub his butt on the mineral thing because that was the only excitement that he had throughout the day. So all of his tail feathers were neon pink, and she just wanted to get rid of him. So she sent him over to me, and as soon as I opened that cage door, he came flying out. He was so excited to be out of that cage. And then after that, he went right back in and was terrified after that. Absolutely terrified of everything. And then shortly after that, I got another call about another cockatiel This one they called Dickie Bird because they said, pardon my language, because I know a lot of children and families watch this channel, but I am just repeating what these people had told me. They called him Dickie Bird because he made a lot of noise, and they would call him a dick for making a lot of noise. So they called him Dickie Bird, which I transferred to Richard. So Richard was in a parakeet cage. Again, just a small cage that I don't like. It was a nice sized cage if you had one parakeet. However, cockatiels are a lot larger. They have long tail feathers. They're a lot bigger than parakeets, so it was just not suited for him. The bottom of the cage was completely crackled up because they had dropped it. And I got him from another lady that rescued him. And then because she had gotten a call that one of the people in her neighborhood had passed away and they had a cockatiel, and this lady's children did not want to take care of the cockatiel anymore, so they threw him and his cage in the dumpster. So they left him in his cage and threw his cage in the dumpster. The next day, somebody found him in there, and wild feral cats were trying to get in there and eat him. So this lady went and picked him up. Well, again, he had one toy. He had a mirror and then a small swing for like parakeets. So he couldn't fit inside of there, so he would chew on it. So it was a little bit better than the cage set up for Wally. However, they had his cover, a blanket covering his cage. They would uncover him, but the lady would smoke cigarettes in her house and blow it into his face when he was too loud. And she lit a candle right next to him, which candles already are a big no-no when you have birds. But she lit a candle next to him, and it lit the blanket that was covering his cage on fire. So he just came from a not so great home as well. Well, when I brought him home, Wally and Richard bonded immediately, which is typically unheard of with two male cockatiels and no females present in the cage. So they would just distress call to each other all day long. So I worked on being able to help them bond a little bit better and eventually moved them into the same cage. I do not have Wally and Richard anymore because after I got them into the same cage, and they just seemed very stressed by the presence of my larger birds, and I had no intentions of keeping them at this point anyway. They were just to be fosters. Well, I fostered them for well over a year because I just could not find them the proper home. People were interested in them, but because they were both such terrified birds and they wouldn't, like Fidget here will step up if you tell her to step up. She'll step down. She doesn't bite. She doesn't run. She doesn't fly away. But they did. They were just terrified of everything. So finding them the right home was very difficult. So a lot of people were interested, but they wanted them for a child or a companion bird, and they had other birds, and I tried to stress that they were not a good fit for children, and that they were not going to be a companion bird if you had other birds in the house. They needed to be the only birds in the house until they got used to you, and then maybe you could add another bird in after them, but they definitely needed some time to get used to their owner on their own. So I rehomed them to my friend Shyler. She had been looking for cockatiels. I told her that they were going to be a little bit of work to try and get them to step up or to be comfortable in their environment. So I do get plenty of updates on Wally and Richard. They are in a fabulous home now. She has them, and she recently got a green cheek conure like Fidget here. So they are getting along just fine with the conure now that they have had time to adjust to a new home. They are still a little bit scared. Wally will come out of the cage. Wally's name is now Grain, and Richard's name is now Mumbo. So Wally will now come out of the cage and will hang out with her and flies around the room and will sit on a perch, but still won't step up. Richard, however, does not come out of his cage. You can leave the door open for hours, but that is his comfort zone, so he does not like to come out. But yeah, so I do get plenty of updates on them. And then past that, I have adopted a lot of parakeets. Some were just to live out the last of their years because they were elderly and people didn't want them anymore. Other ones were just people didn't like the noises that they were making, or that they were being too loud by chirping. And so I have adopted plenty of parakeets. Currently, I have 2 parakeets that I adopted, so the rest of them I don't have anymore. The elderly ones passed away, or I did rehome some of them. 2 of my rescue parakeets I still have, and 1 was just given to me because they decided one day that they just hated birds and couldn't stand the thought of this bird. So they gave it to me. The other one was given to me from a local store. Its leg was splayed out because it had sprained its leg. Since then, she has gotten a lot better and she's fine now. And then my 3rd parakeet was given to me by my fiance's parents, actually breed parakeets. So I got one of their babies. And that was actually my first parakeet ever. I got one of their babies. And then my other 2 parakeets, you have met Pixel and Ducky, were given to me by my friend Shyler. So I got her 2 birds, she got me 2 birds. That's, you know, we gotta replace them. So yeah, those were all my rescue birds. Thank you guys so much for listening to me talk about my rescue birds, and I just hope you guys understand the real parrot crisis and how many people get birds and don't realize what a commitment they are. They're not birds that are just, they're not animals that are just going to live for a year or 2 or even just 5 years. Like, they live, parakeets can live up to 15 years, cockatiels can live up to 30 some years, and it just, as the bird gets bigger, it's got a longer lifespan. There's macaws in their 90s. So you got to think some of these birds can live longer than us. So please stop eating my bracelet. So they are a lifetime commitment. But thank you so much for listening to my rescues. We can get into some of my birds that weren't rescues at another time. I know this was a long video, but thank you guys so much for coming along on this little journey. I appreciate you guys so much. We love you. Say bye, Fidget. Okay, or chew up the camera. That's fine. Bye, guys. We love you. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and we'll see you tomorrow.